I'm Steve Wallace, three-time world champion of the San Francisco 49ers, and I watch Class Act Sports. My favorite one is back in 1994 when we played the San Diego Chargers. I'm sitting there, ESPN is on, and I'm looking at Phil Simms, this great color analyst guy, and he's having his views on the game. And he said, I'm going to step out on the limb, and I'm going to pick the San Diego Chargers, an 18-point underdog, and I'm going to pick these guys. The reason I'm going to pick them because the six-time Pro Bowl Leslie O'Neal is going to dominate the left tackle, Steve Wallace. And I'm going to make this prediction in front of everyone. And I'm sitting in my hotel room thinking, oh my God, is he talking about me? Then all of a sudden I get all these different phone calls. My mom's calling like, did you see ESPN? Everyone I knew was calling me at this point, and I just knew how hard I had worked throughout the week. And normally I jog about 3 to 6 miles during the course of the week, just making sure my mind is right and my body is right. And I knew simply before I stepped on the bus, I was going to have a great day. I had my mind. I constantly told myself, I can do this thing. I can do this thing. I went out there and played the game. And eventually afterwards, he didn't have a tackle all day. So we went on to win the game 49-25. And afterwards, one of the analysts said, Steve Young, who of course who won the MVP, and the boomer, Chris Berman, said, Steve Wallace is my MVP. So that was one of my greatest Super Bowls. It was tough. I mean, when you think about you're an 18-point favorite, and so everything says that this team is capable of beating you. I think only once in the history of the league with the Colts and the Joe Namath when he's running off the field afterwards that they were an 18-point favorite and the Jets pulled off the upset. And so everybody predicted that this would happen all over again, deja vu. And we were determined not to let this happen, without a doubt. When I saw that, the first thing that wants to set in your mind, which is probably like a number of athletes nowadays, when folks doubt you, doubt your ability, doubt you and your level of competition, whether you can compete against another person. It was trying to set in, but I knew how well I performed. And usually when I perform well in practice, I put my mind in a zone, that zone that Michael Jordan talks about. And the thing, when I know I'm there, I usually have this saying, is that this guy, he has a tremendous amount of ability and he can dominate the game like Michael Jordan. And when I say that, I know it's time. I really just want his head to swell up in a sense, and it's time for me to dominate the game. And whenever I come out with that little statement, he has the ability to dominate the game like Michael Jordan, I'm totally trying to shut you out. That was miserable. Thinking back, in the locker room, I can remember I got wheeled out. And so get wheeled out, all these media guys around me. I can remember Ahmad Rashad running over there looking and saying, who is that? Whatever. And I just knew when I heard that statement, I wanted to go back there one day and show, this guy who I was. And so getting wheeled into the locker room, being the third play of the game, and I'm sitting on the head. If you see the footage, I'm sitting on the field and I'm banging my head on the ground, just banging my head because I was so frustrated that I worked this hard. I represented my high school, Shamley High School here in Atlanta. I represented Auburn University. I was a flag for all of them. And then in the third play of the game, I'm on the field. I'm laid out. Joe Montana got hit on a blitz. I heard my ankle just crack and shatter. And when I heard that noise, I said, somebody's hurt. Somebody's hurt bad. I didn't know it was me. My body was in shock. And I just said simply, somebody's hurt and they're hurt bad. And I tried to get up and I couldn't get up. And I said, man, it's me. It's me. And then that's when the realization set in. And then that's when I started banging my head on the ground because I was so disappointed that I wouldn't get to finish that game for the folks that I represented. Yeah, I watched the game in the locker room. Once they found out I had all my ligaments were torn, my ankle was shattered, and I sat in there with the owner, Ed DeBartolo, and we watched the game. And the sad thing is, he's an emotional guy, And so he's jumping up and down and hitting and kicking me. And I'm like, Mr. D, my ankle is broken here. And he was like, okay. And then the next play would happen with Jerry Rice catching, who was the MVP, catching another pass. And he jumped and he kicked me and slugged me. And I was like, man, I thought I told him, my ankle is broken here. And he did that for the rest of the game. And him and I watched the game together. It does mean a lot for the simple fact that, when I talk to kids, I talk to them about that season mostly for the simple fact that we were 6-5. A lot of times in life, you're 6-5, people want to give up on you. And then we came together as a group, the leaders like Joe Montana, Randy Cross, Ronnie Lott, Roger Craig, all of these leaders came together and talked about simply giving it your all in everything you do. And then that's what we did. We went out there, had focus. FOCUS is what I talk about as well. And we put it together one game at a time, one day at a time, one play at a time. And we took that approach and eventually went on to win the World's Championship. I could tell you one thing is that when I first went to Auburn and growing up on Herschel Walker, to me and most of Atlanta natives and Georgia people, Herschel Walker was our hero because what he did for the game, came in as a freshman, played hard, took the Georgia Bulldogs to a national championship. So that was my first experience, growing up here. Then I get to Auburn and I see Bo Jackson, he's out there running and not thinking much about it. He's just another guy. He wasn't even one of the top recruits in the state. And so he's running around, and the first day of practice, he touched a ball, and you have all these All-Americans. He's just knocking them down flat on the back. And I'm thinking to myself, we have this Herschel Walker thing all over again. I'm with a great back, and so I got to start as a freshman, a 17-year-old freshman out there. He was another guy that started, maybe had another two more. And then we had a chance to beat Alabama, which there was a 9-year drought. And then us freshmen out there on the field competing, just giving it our all for Auburn University and eventually to win the game. Like I said, the natural ability just spoke for itself. And similar to Herschel Walker, probably a guy that never lifted a weight, but he has the greatest body you ever want to see. And so he was a guy that came to work hard, each and every day. But growing up in McAdory High School back in Bessemer, Alabama, like I said, he was not being the highest recruited guy. So, probably getting there early, all of a sudden he's having all this success. It was new to him as well. Yeah, going back, having all those concussions, and you think about it, it's kind of routine in a sense, being a player in the NFL, and you just have a concussion, oh well, and then you go, and then maybe later in the season you have another one, not thinking much about it. Next thing you know, you count it up, and you had a total of 9, had 4 in the games, and then 5 in practice, and then you look up and you say, hey, this is a serious issue, and especially nowadays where you see, the guys coming down and having the memory lapse and all of that. So it's a frightening thought, but I wasn't worried about being beautiful, like as John Madden states it, this guy is tough, he's greasy, he's grimy. And so I was like one of his favorite guys, and he was my favorite announcer. But I wasn't worried about what I looked like. A lot of guys call me Gazoo, like the guy on the Flintstones, big head. This guy, his head is so big. So I heard a lot of jokes and all of that. But my main and greatest concern was about how I would live after football. Would I be able to be coherent? Would I be able to talk and listen to everyone and just survive more or less? Yes, I'm wondering if it's, the bright age of 40, I'll say 40 something. I'm wondering if it's that or, because the memory lapse is my short term is just not there a lot of times. But I just take it as it's another day of life and it's becoming more experience. I don't want to say older, so I'll say experience in a sense. I think it's a good thing. And the neat thing about football and games in general is that when you make a rule, guys make adjustments. And it's weird when you think about it. Years ago, you could go hit the quarterback and hit him right up under the chin with your helmet. And then once you find out this is a rule, and then they fine you, and then all of a sudden you start hitting a guy to the side. You become more conscious, because you can do a number of things once you understand and identify with the rules. Usually take 2 years, just like with quarterbacks sitting in the pocket. I was a big advocate for, quarterbacks not get hit below the knee, because you got 11 guys standing in the pocket, and this is a great example of how all the next few years guys make adjustments. They make adjustments on not hitting them in the knee, because they're vulnerable when they're in the pocket like that, and they can't see down the field. And so you'll see in the next couple of years that they make adjustments on that the same way they'll make adjustments on the head. Very simple. It'll work itself out. It's too much money. The owners will lose a lot of money. The players will lose a lot of money. They'll go back and forth. They'll stick their chests out. But it'll work itself out. I think the fans, hopefully, will win in the end. I mean, because it's all about coming together. Like you said, the injuries, all of these things have to be taken into account, that you got to include all these things for, guys when they leave the game. They got to take that more serious, because guys aren't playing as long. Contracts are bigger. So guys aren't playing as long, so they have to look at the true issues at hand. Yes, because I'm not sure what it is for the guys that are currently playing, but guys that have been out in the last 7 to 8 years, after the 2 years out of the game, you don't have any. And then for most parts, no insurance carrier want to take you on, because they figured you've had an injury or two. So you're looking at it like that, then you have to include all of these things, because life goes on and you can't play the game forever. So once you get out of the game, you continue to need insurance, and the game is what caused most of these injuries for you. Just like myself, when I left the game, then my last year, I was fairly healthy going in my last year, and then something as small as not knowing a snap count. I want to be a wily veteran and not jump off sides. So I go to Kansas City, 1 year in Kansas City, and not wanting to jump off sides. So I was a hair slow on it. I get a stalemate, center takes me out, and from that point on, really never ever to run again. You think about how you've been able to run and do things just in life that you take for granted. And then at the age of 32, I could never run again really the rest of my life. Wow, I better never say anything negative about my coach, Coach Pat Dye, because I see him all the time, love him to death. I mean, I'll just say this. He set the tone as far as determination and just a mindset that is relentless. So probably helped me out of a lot of Pro Bowls, because my mindset, I was just vicious in my own right, because I felt like that's the way I should play the game. I wasn't worried about being anyone's friend. I did whatever it took to protect the quarterback. I would give you I call it an accidental jab under the jaw. If that took your mind off of hitting Joe Montana or hitting Steve Young, then I was doing my job. But, there's no way I can say any three. Bill Walsh. Without Bill Walsh, I would have never become a starter with the San Francisco 49ers. I can recall when Bill Walsh retired, we probably had 5 of the best players on the team were somewhat critical of him and saying, Bill, never let us relax, never let us play, and never let us become ourselves, never let us become the players that we want to be. And I had this on the radio. They had this question asked, are you just another guy that's happy to see Bill Walsh leave? And my answer was simply, Bill Walsh didn't bring me to San Francisco to be his friend, to shake hands, to sign autographs. Bill Walsh brought me to San Francisco simply like he told me the day I walked in the door, to become a champion. And so how could I not love that guy with every ounce of energy? He's the same guy that, he had a choice to make, whether he plays, his early round draft pick in Bubba Paris or Steve Wallace, and he chose me. And then at the same time, that set the tone, for the San Francisco 49ers. George Seifert, when I was ready to give up on football, my 11th or 12th year in the league, George Seifert said no. I got cut from Philadelphia in a short camp. I got a little heavy. And George Seifert and Steve Young stayed on the phone about 5 hours in a row calling me constantly. I said, I'm tired of playing. I don't want to play anymore. And George Seifert was the guy that told me when I felt down and out that, hey, you still have it. And I went on my 11th year to go back to San Francisco to probably have my greatest year in my career. I mean, think about that. One of the greatest quarterbacks in the league, after you got cut from a team that's, calling you. I was out playing golf. I said, I don't want to play anymore. I'm through with it. I'm tired. And Steve Young said, I have to have you. And the team used to call me sexy. Sexy, I have to have you. I'm not going to take no for an answer. You're going to have your butt out here on the plane tomorrow, and that's that. And I hung up the phone. I was on the plane. So, probably the most from Walsh. You know, Seifert just was my type of coach as far as a player's coach. He said, never call him that because that'll get him fired. So, but Walsh was a guy that taught us all. And he's a guy that I love, a guy that talked about me in the book, The Blind Side, and which a lot of folks don't know that part of the story. They just know the story about Michael Orr and the family, the adoption process. But as I say, you know, Michael, love him to death. The two is outstanding folks, very nice. But at the same time, Michael didn't have to face that Lawrence Taylor, that Richard Dent, that Chris Doman, all those mean, greasy, slimy guys that make you wake up in the middle of the night, you know, kicking and thinking like, man, do I have to face this guy? You have a week of torture to go throughout, and you have to get your mind right to battle and compete against these guys, as I say, one day at a time, one play at a time. He was tough. He was very tough because he was a guy that wouldn't ever let you set your feet, meaning that, you know, he made you dance. He was a smaller guy, which if a lot of guys watch the game of football today, they would understand that, you know, you can have, all the guys don't have to be bigger. You can take a smaller guy, put him out in an area and say, okay, now you're 320 pounds, but you're going to operate in space. And that's what Lawrence Taylor was the best at. He was the best at operating in space, and then he created that slap when you hit the quarterback, knock the ball loose, pick it up and run it in for a touchdown. He created that. He was a smart football player. Most folks don't give him enough credit for being that type of player, and they all were. Those guys, the All-Pros, the Bruce Smith, the Pat Swillens, all those guys, Chris Doman, Richard Dent, they all studied the game. And what they did, if you made a mistake, if you made a hairline mistake, then they took advantage of it. They had a counter that was so quick that they were abusive on the quarterback. And with those guys, like I said, with Lawrence Taylor, he would operate outside. How can a guy, 250, sometimes probably 240 at the most, run over? I mean, you saw how big those Washington Redskins were. Those were some real hogs back in the day. And he would dance and fake with you. Next thing you know, he's running right over a big guy like, you know, some of those monsters for Washington. I guess that stems from your parents and your upbringing. My mom always said, treat everyone the same, meaning that if it was the smallest guy in your class or the most nerdiest guy in your class, and you treat him just the same that you treat the most popular person. And I was always like that. And so when you're raised up like that, you just always carry that type of mindset. And that's taught from the parents. It surprised a lot of folks because I can't even explain it. When I got on the football field, I think most of that occurred from my high school coaches pushing me to the limits. And then you have to open up your mind to be to accept that. You know, if a coach wants you, nowadays I talk to these kids about if a coach wants you to run 10 sprints, so to speak, then you have to be willing to give them 12. You have to have a mindset that whatever you want to do, coach, you can't hurt me because I'm here to win. And that's the thing about me. I simply love to win. So whatever it takes, my mind is open, my heart is open. You know, if you want me to study longer, whatever it takes, I'm committed to it. You know, similar to the guys that win, your Kobe Bryants, your Derek Jeters. And they have to be committed like that. It's nothing easy about winning. Think about what you said. What a blessing that is. You know, you play with one of the greatest running backs that would have been one of the greatest ever. Even Emmitt Smith said that, is that my first year I go to San Francisco and I got all pro, Wendell Tyler, Joe Cribbs, Roger Craig on the team, and they come back home and say simply that, Bo, I think you're as good as any of these guys. So that talent was something that you took for granted until later you saw him running over linebackers. We're not going to call names and running out of tunnels. And then now I get to see him a lot. So the friendship is just awesome now. You know, we pull for each other in life. And then, like you said, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott. Ronnie Lott is one of the greatest, most unselfish players I ever played with because he made sure everyone else was around him. He showed younger players once he left the team how to become leaders, what they had to do. I mean, the reason we had so many winning seasons, most folks think is, because of the great coaches. No, it was because we had guys like Ronnie Lott wouldn't allow us when we playing the lonely Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they had barely maybe 2 wins or whatever, that we wouldn't, Ronnie Lott would call practice at the end of practice and say, hey, we're not having a good day. We got to have this game. This is the most important game. This is the game we're playing right now. It's the most important game. And so that's why we had numerous years of 14-2, 13-3, because guys like Ronnie Lott wouldn't allow us to have bad practices. Joe Montana was so awesome because I'm in the huddle right beside this guy. And most of the time when he comes in, sometimes I'm kind of a funny guy, and I'll try to crack a joke. Joe didn't see any of that, didn't feel any of that. Similar to Tom Brady, similar to Peyton Manning. I mean, and I look at Romo, folks say, why isn't he doing it? I mean, you look at Romo, his demeanor on the field. He plays and he goose offs and he laughs, and then he throws that last second interception. Other guys do that too, that have such a great time. They find a way to throw that last. Joe Montana was so awesome and so precise in his decisions. He'd come up and he would practically know where he's throwing the ball by looking at the safety, looking at the defense, and all in one motion, and looking at his primary receiver back to his secondary receiver without even thinking about it, just by looking at his adjustments and going through his check down. And that's how awesome he was. And probably that's why I feel like it today in life, playing with him. I can remember one year that we went on to win the Super Bowl, and I shared this story with the Auburn Tigers. You guys have to see that, is that our team was down 17-0. We were down 17-0 against the Rams, and it didn't look good. We came together. This is our back-to-back. After we won in '88, we were playing again in '89. Had a team meeting. We know we're going to pull it together. How do you have a team meeting about focus, about enduring, and you're down 17-0? So we go in the locker room, and guys are just looking around like, what's happening? What's going on? We practice well. We put ourselves in a zone, and the Rams have just, and Seifert came in and said, guys, they simply have done everything perfect. If they make a mistake, then we'll be back in this game, and probably we'll win it. And so we took that approach. And like you said, having Joe Montana on the sideline, Joe Montana goes back to pass, hit John Taylor. We're on the 5-yard line, hit John Taylor. Jerry Rice make a tremendous block. Everyone else rallies on the play, score a touchdown. A few minutes later, Joe Montana on the 7-yard line, go back, hit John Taylor again. He hops up out of tackle. The whole team rallies and blocks. We go down and score, come back to win that game, and eventually come back to win the Super Bowl 55-10 against the Denver Broncos. So that tells you the type of player Joe Montana is.